I really appreciate you taking the time out to share some of your experiences and just let people who are around the world understand, some of the activities that have been going on and some of the experiences that you and your family and your colleagues and your friends have been experiencing. It's really good that the Scottish diaspora has such a strongly connected community to be able to connect with you. But I'm sad under the circumstances that we're having this conversation. So maybe we can start by just talking about you and who you are. I know that you came from Scotland. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your heritage and your connection with Scotland, and then maybe move on to what motivated you to move to the Ukraine?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Amy. So, well, as you know very well, my first few years of life were in Edinburgh and around Davison Mains, Queensferry Road. And from Edinburgh, I went to, when I was 10 years old, I moved to Helensburgh. My family moved to Helensburgh. Went to school there, and when I was self-employed, when I was 21 years old, had different companies, different entrepreneurial entities that we were doing, and but I was at about 23, 24. I started the Berlin Wall came down in 89, and in 91 Ukraine got its independence along with a lot of other Soviet Union countries. I went with a partner of mine called Robert McNeil. Robert McNeil's father started a company called Eclipse, which is the retail arm was called Apollo Blinds. It was a big franchise organization for window blinds. And we just went and traveled around Eastern Europe looking for business opportunities, just to see what it was like. No business plan, just see what it was like. There was obviously, almost 400 million people that were in the communist system that were now in a capitalist society. And we knew there would be business opportunities there, right? So we traveled around, Poland, Hungary, Latvia, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan for 6 months, 7 months, on and off, back and forth to Scotland. And we found a really good partner in Kiev. We liked Kiev a lot. So yeah, we sold my businesses in Scotland and moved to Kiev. We liked Kiev. It was a smaller, I sort of compare it with Glasgow and London, where everybody was running off to Moscow. But Kiev was a nicer place. People had more time for you. It wasn't so much everybody's rushing with big money to the place. And Ukraine at that point was 51 million people. So it was a big country.
That's incredible. It's nearly as big as the UK.
Right. So that's when I left, and I'm one of 6 children. So I'm number 3 of 6. My parents split when I was about 16. My mother married the celebrity Jimmy Logan, and they were very happy together until Jimmy passed almost 20 years ago now. I was very close to Jimmy and his sister, Annie Ross, who lived in New York. She was a very famous jazz singer. Their cousin, the nephew was Dominic Allen, who was part of the band he was part of one of the very famous pop bands and things, a big celebrity family. And so, yeah, but then when I went, so I used a lot of my Scottish just when I went to Kiev. And we opened up, I didn't open up immediately. We did a Scottish night. We didn't even do a Burns night. It was a Scottish night we did, because of course the Irish did their St. Patrick's the month or 2 before. And we said, okay, we must have something. And it was around my birthday. And I remember there was 2 other Scots guys that had our birthdays at the same time. So we called it the Scottish Birthday Bash. And we invited everybody with the kilts and just had a big party. And then from that success, somebody said, we've got to do a Burns night. So we then made a Burns night. This wasn't for charity. It was very early on. It was about 95, 96. So we said, everybody throw in $100 ticket and we'll just have a party. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And it went very well. And I said, this was great. We must do it, for charity. And we can do this. And we can do this. So it evolved then into, a vehicle of just coming together as Scots or other friends in Ukraine and other international community to come and have a Scots night, to actually a vehicle that raised money. And of course, we chose Burns Night, but we did it quite differently than maybe a traditional Burns Night because of such an international crowd. And we had over 700 people attending, and we were raising well over 100,000 euros a night. And I myself and a few others started the Kiev Lions Club. So I'm a founder, 2 times president of that. And then we just did Burns Nights for 20 odd years. And we had people like Johnny Beattie, if you know Johnny Beattie's, and a lot of celebrities from Scotland, the Red Hot Chili Pipers, and Jimmy Logan, of course, came over for several years. And many others.
That's funny. Johnny Beattie used to actually have a caravan at the caravan site that we used to go to, and my mom and dad used to hang out with him whenever he used to be at the caravan site. So that's
he's an amazing guy, and I've met him obviously many times since. And unfortunately, I think he passed away. So there's been a great success. It was the biggest event that everybody looked forward to every year in Kiev.
And I heard that you told me earlier that you won a Lifetime Achievement Award for inspiring the expat community in Ukraine. What was it that you did to get that?
Yeah, I think it was networking. To be honest, it was networking. It was putting everybody together. It was charity events, business networking and things like this, because it's such an international crowd there that when you do events, because not only did I then, once I established the Burns Night and I took over the presidency of the club, I was then also responsible, not just as a president, but I was running all the events as well, because my company at that point we were importing food products and doing promotions and events for mostly fast-moving consumer goods and things like this. It was a big marketing company. And so I had the resources to put events together. So that's what you do. You see, well, what strengths do I have that I can bring to the club? So I started a Cossack night. So we did a Cossack night. So I wanted the equivalent of a Burns Night, but in Ukraine. So this was because the Burns Nights, of course, were in the winter, and Kiev's beautiful in the summer. And it was a shame not to use the sunshine and the open space in the summer. And so we came up with a Cossack night where you had horses running by and the Cossacks on the horses doing lots of sword tricks and knife tricks and barbecues. And, we all had our Ukrainian dress on and Cossack outfits on. And again, it raised a huge amount of money. And we had 2 major events then that the Lions Club had under their wing that helped us raise a lot of money. And of course, when you do these events, you bring people together. And it doesn't just mean that they see each other for that night. They always say, oh, we must get together about something. They'll talk about something. And they'll say, oh, this is what I do. I go cycling. I do squash. I do too. Oh, and, you build the community. And so friends become closer friends, or you build new friendships, or business gets done. You get people to introduce them in business. So that was very successful. And I think that contributed a huge amount to the business community, how much people loved the business community and loved living there, as well as the good work we were doing for the charities. And it was, it made it quite easy for me to phone up people and get support for different events or different projects that we were supporting.
Yeah, it sounds like Ukraine and Kiev has a really phenomenal culture. Can you talk about some of the culture, some of the things that you really gravitated towards, and then maybe we'll move on to how it's changed now. But I'd love to hear, what living in Ukraine was like.
It's still Europe, so it's not foreign, right? And you're so close to Europe that that's obviously convenient. They're very smart, 97% literacy, right? Everybody goes to universities. Wow. And that's why Ukraine actually was one of the biggest outsourcing countries for IT in the world, right? It was booming with outsourced people from IT. So they've got a very young, smart, enthusiastic people that they can travel now all over Europe without visas and things like that. So, but then you also had, the older generation who loved the traditions, right? Who had their family meals, and they, like maybe a lot of Scots traditions, they kept a lot of those traditions, how to eat, how to party, how to toast, how to respect people, So I love the balance of the new, but still respecting traditions of past. And it was such a blank canvas when, remember the Soviet Union may have collapsed in '89, but it really collapsed probably 20 years before that, it was not bankrupt in one day, it was bankrupt over years and years and years. So finally, when it happened, hospitals didn't have anything, there was nothing really, the roads, any infrastructure was all gone, right? People were selling anything they had just to survive. So when they had this new chance to revive themselves, it was an amazing country to be in. And every year it changed so much. And you could see it develop so much. And I think that's also one of the problems that we see Ukraine in now, because Putin doesn't want that on his country. And Ukraine also, don't forget, not only have we been dealing with people like Putin over the last 8 years when he annexed Crimea and Donetsk and Lugansk regions, but he put in his own president. They put in their own pro-Russian president, and there was an orange revolution. There was the revolution of dignity. So the Ukrainians have been fighting for this freedom. And I saw in your brochure that you sent out to people, it was very much that. It was people were, as long as there's one person with a gun, they weren't going to give up. And
the Declaration of our growth. Yes. Yes.
That's what they're like. And they've been fighting for this freedom as they've got a very nasty, bigger neighbor next door. And for their own selfish reasons, wants to keep his power, feels threatened by Ukraine. That's probably some of the reasons why, because Ukraine was getting very successful, even through all the issues. But through those fights and revolutions that they had, they really kept on bonding the country more and more. When you have 1 million people on the street at -20, and they're fighting for the Orange Revolution, for instance, to get this president out of the country. If you remember, even before that, the president was poisoned. The pro-European one was poisoned. This is something that they've been fighting for a lot, and it's really brought the country together. And yeah, they're such nice people. They're so, they're a little bit guarded initially, because that was a part of the Soviet Union sort of mentality. Because in the Soviet Union times, you wouldn't speak to many people, right? Because there was no bars, restaurants, and no one could overhear what you said in case there was KGB people around and things like that. So people would always be very quiet when they're out. And then at home, they would open the vodkas and say what they wanted, because they were surrounded by friends and family. And they still got that little bit of reserve. But once they get to know you, they're very friendly and yeah, remarkable people. And at least I could have moved it from Ukraine anytime I wanted over the 28 years. And I've never done it because I never really, and I've traveled the world, and I've got offices and I've got business around the world. I just never found something that really was better.
Can you talk a little bit about the architecture? I mean, I've seen some really pretty pictures of Kiev and other cities. What is the architecture like there?
Oh, the architecture is beautiful. Of course, the traditional buildings are beautiful. It got bombed a lot in World War II, and any buildings or facades of that era, before the World War, have to be kept, or there's no, and are getting modernized to look fantastic. Ukraine's a very, very old city. It's hundreds and thousands, maybe 1,000, but hundreds of years older than Moscow. And it's very religious, and that's where the Kiev Rus Empire started from, and that's why you got the Russian Rus Empire. It all started from Kiev. And so the architecture is absolutely stunning. They've got a beautiful river splitting the city in two. It's golden beaches all the way there. So you can basically walk from the city center 10 minutes and you're on a beach. And there's all different restaurants there. And so it's absolutely gorgeous. Everybody that comes always loves it. It's got some ugly parts where the World War II, after World War II, they had to just build all these apartments. The place got flattened, and the places, but they're coming down, and there's new beautiful buildings going up now. And But they've had their challenges, but they keep on moving forward, and
Yeah.
yeah, every year it gets more and more improved.
Very hardy communities.
Yeah,
So
and it's a beautiful city. And then you've got different parts of Ukraine. I'm just talking about Kiev there, but Odessa is famous. The Crimea was beautiful. I sat on the table where Churchill and Roosevelt and Stalin sat down in Crimea, and you've got Lviv on the west coast, and all the villages and farmlands, and it's a big country. It's bigger than France. It's got 30% of the world's black soil there. It's the breadbasket of Europe. But yeah, the architecture is very deep, to say, traditions and heritage. And that reflects in the architecture.
That's very interesting to hear you talk about the size of the country and, of course, the population. I think a lot of people outside of Europe, when you're looking at a map, it just kind of looks small, and people are fascinated when they know it's got a population of 48 million people or whatever it is now. It's just amazing. It was really good to hear what life was like in Ukraine. I know that within the last 2 months things have changed very considerably, and you and your family went through a very personal journey to make the decision to leave, and to leave very quickly. Can you talk about some of the signs that you saw, to put you in this mindset of, we actually have to leave, and are we leaving for, a week? Are we leaving for good? I mean, nobody knows really, I guess, but
we still ask ourselves that question.
Yeah. What was your decision process to decide to leave, and what kind of signs were you seeing around you?
Well, no one wanted to leave. Let's get that right. No one ever wants to leave the house and leave the friends, family, school, everything you've lived and been
28 years you've been there. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously there's people that have lived there a lot longer. I was one of the oldest expats, if you like, but you got the whole Ukrainian population. So no one wanted to leave. Now, we've seen Putin put tanks and things before around borders. It happens all the time. And certainly for the 8 years past, there always was tanks and things there. And there was always a sort of ongoing tit for tat war going on in the Donbass regions. And of course, we were still trying to fight to get Ukraine back in the courts and etc. So, when he came to the border, but of course, we're not naive that how much extra that he had brought with him this time. And the American president was saying, listen, he's already deciding to go in. But that was about 3-4 days before maybe he was going in. So when you're working there, you're saying, no, we're not going to provoke this. We're going to continue keeping the economy going. Everybody was still working. The press started to come over because as Brits we were said, oh, all the British must leave and the French must leave and the embassy of the UK is moving to Lviv and the German government's left and Lufthansa are not keeping their flights overnight anymore. And these ones are not flying anymore because the insurance companies stopped insuring the flights. So you started seeing a lot of this happen. And we were saying, well, listen, we're not just going to run away, right? I was interviewed a lot, and that's when you saw me maybe on BBC and contacted me. I was saying, we're not going to leave. We want to stay as long as we can. But every day you ask yourself the same question. Should we stay? Should we go? Should we stay? Should we go? I think about even 10 days before we actually left, I spoke with my wife and I said, listen, why don't we just go out early and go for a week holiday somewhere? Just let's go and enjoy and go drive around Europe or do something like that. And she said, no, we're not going to. She didn't want to leave. When we had our mother-in-law who's been living with us, who wouldn't be well, we didn't want to leave her just in case something happened. Although we packed the car once, we said, right, we're going to go. The next morning when I woke up, my wife's downstairs sitting having a coffee, and she just said, I can't leave. Right? I'm not going to do it. And I immediately understood. I didn't want to leave either, right? But she said, okay, then we stay. So again, it's this 1 minute you decide to go, next minute you're staying, etc. And then we said, okay, let's stay as long as we can. And the only reason we would leave if there was anything that was going to endanger the children. We didn't want them to hear bombs or go through any, horror stories. And so that was the sort of line we drew in the sand, that if the children if there was any threat to them, then that's the moment we'd leave. As a foreigner, I wouldn't be allowed to pick up a gun anyway. There was nothing I could do. But I wanted to make sure that my family were out, the children were out, the mother-in-law was, and I've also got my brother number 6 of 6. He's got a wife and 2 children, etc. And I've got my employees, friends, and extended family.
Right.
So,
Your community is there. It must be such a hard decision.
right. I mean, if we're talking about, networking, certainly in business, networking can be great, right? You can pull in people from different cities, different skill sets. But when you're in a situation like I'm in, it almost works to your disadvantage a little bit, because you get so many beautiful, caring people write to you constantly, and you're trying to get things done, and you've got 50 another 80 messages today, and you want to write back to them, and God bless them, thank you for writing, thank you for caring, but it's just overwhelming if your network's that busy, as well as you're trying to talk to your brother, sister, many times that day. So it was quite difficult, because you can't reply to people, and the people, all my friends, we weren't contacting each other because they were in the same situation. I didn't have time to write to all my friends, and they didn't have time to write to me. And it was only like a week or two after we said, "Where are you?" Maybe they posted something, but you can't see every post that's out there. Then you started to hear that, oh yeah, well, so and so's in Warsaw, so and so's in Zagreb, or so and so's in Berlin, or because everybody just split all over the place. Now that was the foreigners, of course, and when we talk about the local Ukrainian men, they had to stay behind. Right. And they weren't allowed out of the country. But this is, we decided, I did a trial run to Lviv, right? And with my two boys, I couldn't really convince Lena, my wife, that easy, because one, I can understand, right? So mother's there, plus it's her country. She definitely she believed in her army, etc. So she was a lot more emotional about her decision maybe than I was, a bit more practical about it, albeit I'm very Ukrainian in my heart and mind. So she said, no, believe in the army. I said, listen, let me bring in the boys. So this was a way how I could get the boys, my two sons, involved with also the decision, and quite rightly so. They should be in that process. We never really talked about it for a long time with them until I brought it up. And then they said, yeah, well, that's why at school we kept on seeing people leave, because all the diplomat children were leaving. The big multinational kids were leaving. People on shotgun were leaving. So the classroom started to get smaller, and they started to say, well, why am I still here? Right? So when I spoke to the boys, and I said, there's something going on with Russia, they knew exactly, right? And when I thought I was trying to protect them, they knew exactly. They were online, they'd talked about it at school, etc. And I said, well, listen, what I want to do is I want to do a trial run to Lviv, which is usually it's 5-hour drive to this Lviv, and it's about an hour from Lviv to the border. So I went there, I got an apartment there, I put food there, I got extra fuel there, and just in case we needed to go somewhere safe, in case, because remember, Belarus were starting to get involved in this, and there started to be troops on the north of Kiev that made it very accessible, or so the Russians thought, accessible to get to Kiev. I took the boys that weekend. We left on the Saturday morning, and we stayed overnight 2 nights. And then on Monday, I said, right, and I phoned my wife. I said, do you want me to come and get you, or you could drive here and we can stay in the apartment? And Biden was also trying to reach out to Putin, and there was talk that they were going to talk on Wednesday. There was another thing that there was going to be some diplomatic talks on Thursday. And we said, well, listen, they're still talking, right? Everybody's hoping for this diplomatic solution. So I drove back another 7 hours to Kiev, and I got home late Monday night and went to work on Tuesday, went to work on Wednesday, went to work on Thursday. But during those Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday days, we realized that the talks there was no talks. Biden was not talking to Putin. The foreign ministers were not talking to each other. In fact, it was just getting worse and worse. And I think Putin came out with his Ukraine doesn't exist, and Ukraine was made up, and Ukraine was a mistake, and Ukraine should, all this really nasty talk. And this was when Biden was saying he's already decided to go in, although people in Ukraine still thought, well, even if he is, he'll go into Donbass. He'd be crazy to try and take the whole of Ukraine. People in Kiev are still working away. I said to my guys, and I've got a partner from New Zealand, a business partner from New Zealand for over 20 years. We had a talk, and no one believed that he would take Kiev. No one. We just you can't come into Kiev. It's 4 million people, and it's 45 million people. You'll never hold Ukraine anyway, and you'll just want to take Donbass, maybe that land bridge down to Crimea. It'll be focused there, and we'll all be fine here. But on that night, and it says you didn't sleep well for the weeks before this, right? This was every night you were worried, am I going to wake up and be at the wrong side of a crisis here, and I can't get out, and the panic will start. right? Because people weren't panic buying at all. You were going to the supermarket and nobody was panic buying. It was quite surreal for maybe a lot of the journalists there who are convinced, listen, there's going to be a war here. And everybody in Ukraine is just like, it's okay. It's just Putin just saber rattling. It's not, if there is, there'll be something there. And I think, although we weren't naive to the possibility of it, if we in Ukraine ran away every time Putin came to the border, you wouldn't get anything done. And I say that to everybody listening. Imagine Scotland was surrounded by Russian fleet. And then we were told, right, all the Italians must leave, all the Indians must leave, all the Chinese must leave, all the English must leave. You can't do that. You're married to an Italian, so you can't split up families. It's not as though the Scottish woman's going to stay there and the Italian husband can leave. No, the Italian guy's going to stay. And it's like, well, why would you stay? Well, then bring your wife with you. So then what? Then you and your wife need to leave. How about your children? Well, you should bring the children. Well, how about my grandparents? How about the one that's in a nursing home? How about bring them in? So hold on, what we're getting here is everybody in the country should leave just because this guy's at a border. And that's not going to happen. And again, when we talk about the Arbroath, the
declaration.
Yeah, the declaration thing. Then it's you're fighting for your freedom. They know what Putin's country's like and how much brainwashing they do there. They know it very well. They know it from Stalin times when there was over 8 million killed in the famine that was there. They know what it was like in World War II. They've fought for the freedom. They've got 30 years of the freedom that they've really enjoyed, and they're going to fight every inch for it. So yeah, that's why they were staying to the last point. We're going to keep the economy going. Let's not worry about this. But then, of course, that night I started to hear in my social media groups and the people were saying, no, this is it. It's going to happen. It's happening. And then somebody said there was a bomb going off in Donetsk. There was a bomb going off in Kharkiv. And people were saying, that's it. It started, right? And that was the last message I remember seeing. It's on, right? And I said, right. I closed the phone and I woke up my wife and I woke up my eldest son. And I said, right, guys, we talked about this before. We've talked about, listen, we would leave if we thought you were in danger. This war's now started. We don't want to be on the wrong side of an exit here, and then we're going to leave now. And they started to think, and my son immediately went, yes, absolutely, right, let's go. And then my wife and I talked, and she was like, yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's get out now. I said, I'm convinced. And then we heard a bomb go off. Then we heard the first bang. It wasn't so close to us, but it was close enough that you could really hear it enough that you knew it wasn't a puncture of a tire. And then suddenly everybody got packed quite quickly. And although we had the car, this was a blessing. We had the car full of fuel all the time, every night. I had 2 cans of fuel in the car. We had blankets in the car because that test, the run that we did, a dummy run we learned something from that. I knew how much fuel it would take. I knew how much time, knew the roads a bit better because there was potholes in these roads. They're not, they're not German roads with autobahns. There's potholes, and a lot of people got caught out on them and had punctures in the tire. When you got a puncture in your tire and you got millions of people trying to leave, that sets you back a day.
Yeah.
To try and get a new tire from somewhere. The AA are not going to come out and suddenly fix your tire. So things like this and having enough food and water in the car was good for us. So when we heard that, we packed and we had to leave the dog behind. We got a big Labrador, so we left that behind. But my driver and my house cleaning lady that looks after us, they ended up staying in the house because they lived in high-rise apartment buildings, so it was safer for them to stay in my house. I also had a basement in there as well, so they managed to look after the dog, which was good. But yeah, as soon as we opened the garage door to leave, we had the second bomb go off, and that was starting to get scary because then you're thinking, holy shit, we're actually going out to roads and we're hearing bombs. I mean, luckily enough, we didn't hear any more, but we didn't know if that was going to be 1 or 100 were suddenly going to fall out of the sky and you're driving on the roads. But luckily enough, my house was on the outskirts of the city and very close to the road heading to Poland. And so I managed to get on that motorway within 5 minutes. And then I was on quite clean. But it was quite a crazy next 2 hours because people were driving panically there. Then
were the roads busy with lots of other people making the same decisions?
It wasn't so much it was busy. It was people were driving much more crazily. They were really panic driving because I imagine you just wanted to put your foot down as fast as possible, which was obviously the wrong thing to do. And if you left, a few meters in front, say like 5-10 meters in front of the next vehicle, you'd have someone hop, sort of leapfrogging in front of you, trying to, because these are only like 1 or 2 lane sort of motorways, right? If you want to call them that.
Mm-hmm.
So they were driving it. Now, I don't know if they were drunk. You might get people who are, imagine if you're 2 o'clock in the morning and you're having a drink, and then next thing you're hearing bombs, and next thing you're driving, with a drink inside you. And that started to make me drive a little bit more crazy, was I started to drive closer to the people in front of me, so I couldn't have these guys jumping in front. But then I realized that's exactly the wrong thing to do. So I just kept my space and let people do their thing. And I just carried on safely, at a good speed, but safely going along. And then after 2 hours, I started to see these cars sort of get off the road because they had no fuel, because they had maybe a quarter of a tank or half a tank. But then by that point, I could see what was happening. The fuel stations were getting really busy. Mm-hmm. And when people were stopping, they were filling up any container they had, so it was like 20 minutes for every car, for every stop. And so if you had 20, 40 cars behind each pump, you were in there for a couple of hours. Luckily, because we had fuel in the car, but we also had a full tank, we just carried on and managed to get, we were going to go to Lviv, and we realized, and then we heard that there was actually a bomb went off in Lviv. And we said, oh, no, okay, they're bombing every city now. Let's just head for the border. And so when we went to the border, we had about a 9-hour wait in the queue to get over the border. And finally, now, again, people had no fuel. It was getting really cold at night now. And people couldn't turn their cars on because they couldn't afford to spend the fuel. So you had children and things like this that were, just very cold, and elderly people. My brother, who got caught in the exit, there was elderly people who died of hypothermia, just in the car, and put them at the side of the road. And but you imagine, then this. So it was 9 hours for us, but I knew there was then, the next day it was already 2 days, 3 days to get through. Mm-hmm. And there was horrible photographs of people trying to exit Kiev. I don't know if you saw that. Like many people did on the news. It was like every car of Kiev trying to get out. It was just gridlock.
Oh, that, yeah.
And so that was, if you left, I left at 5 o'clock in the morning, but if you left at 7:30, you were stuck in it. You couldn't get out. It was too difficult. And finally, we got over the Polish border about 10, 11 o'clock at night, and found a little hotel. And yeah, that was about an 18-hour journey from that. And you just felt exhausted because you're just hearing on the news everything that's happening. And then you're phoning everybody saying, get out. And they say, you can't get out. The streets are blocked. And say, well, maybe you'll be okay because you're not in the city center. It was just going on and on and on. Every question you were asked. Yeah, it was a crazy time. And people are still, going through it even worse now. I'm the 0.001% of the lucky ones. There's still people stuck in Mariupol and other cities that just can't get out and no food for weeks now. Mm-hmm. So, I was happy I got out early. But as soon as you cross over, you're immediately trying to help everybody else get out, right? And because housing is going to be the next problem, right? And where people are going to stay and all that.
We talked in our kind of pre-chat session that you were mentioning, a lot of the people coming out over the borders now are women and children, because the men have to stay behind and basically fight for the country, but only fight if they're called up. Is that correct? Or
yeah,
right now.
No, you're exactly. And there's a few exceptions. If you have 4 children, then the husband can leave. But it's generally, if you're 18 to 60. This happened about 24 hours after, I would say. So the men got out in the first 24 hours, but then they closed the border. They called martial law, and they said, right, no men can leave unless, they had some very, very special circumstances. And yes, so that's what happened. That's why, not only did people have to leave their cities and homes, but then they had to leave their husbands or brothers and fathers and daughters and sons again, and there's been stories where you know, the little daughter thought the daddy didn't want to come, and she said, "Come with us," and she started getting angry with the dad because, you know, she thought he was the one not wanting to come with her. You know, she just didn't understand. Yeah, and then, you know, so we hosted, you know, all different families here, and of course they're on the phone to their dads. Oh, look, that's my bed tonight, and the dad, you know, the woman had to leave across a border with a child, without their partner, not knowing where they're going to go, not knowing if they're going to get fed, not knowing if they're going to get housed. The money that they may have, you know, because the currency got devalued and stuff, so the purchase power was much less than it would have been. And you know, Europe's a lot more expensive than Ukraine. It doesn't last long, right? And you got, so it was, and these are intelligent people. These are people that within 24 hours before, you know, a few days before, were living a lovely life in a cafe and had jobs and had beautiful schools to go to and had a wonderful life. And now, within, you know, days, hours, they've got nothing. They've got the, you know, a rucksack and no partner and no home to go to and going God knows where. That's heartbreaking. Yeah, it's and again, they were the lucky ones in the early part. It's the ones that are really stuck that were the problem. The orphans, the elderly, the disabled, you know, the people that need care. They are the ones that are always left behind.
It's truly heartbreaking to hear this firsthand from you as well. I mean, we see it in the news every day here, but just, you know, hearing it is just terrible. What kind of challenges are you anticipating for your family? I mean, you're in Poland now in temporary accommodation. How do you envision your life is going to play out over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that again, one of my advantages was getting it over early. Everybody goes through the same sort of mental process almost when you get across from the border, or you know, I've got people that tried to stay 7 days and then they got out and they're shell shocked. They've got PSD. They've got, you know, they just need to get somewhere where they, you know, can rest and not think about anything else. Just trying to at least, because, you know, what happened, if you saw earlier on, just to skip a little bit, when the war started, Kiev and other cities, Ukraine banned alcohol. There was no alcohol allowed, which I think was a fantastic idea. War, alcohol, guns don't go well. However, what we've seen happen in Irpin and other towns where the Russians have been, they've just been drinking away, having a party, firing at people. That's the way that, you know, they've been managed by their army, right? And you've seen the horrific stories coming out of there. You know, it wasn't so everybody was there. They couldn't have alcohol, anything to sleep or anything. They were very scared, and food was getting tight. I was a little bit ahead of my thing because I was out the country maybe a week or 2 weeks before the masses started, because I've always said I got out very early, maybe, but there was this tsunami of refugees coming. And the pictures you saw in Kiev of the cars, not just from Kiev, but from other cities, going to come to this border very soon. There's going to be massive shortages of places to stay, etc. So, but what's happened with us is that, we stayed in a hotel for the first 5 days, 6 days. And I got to know the Radisson general manager well. We had friends in common. I know the people from different Radissons. We were together helping people who really needed places. Radisson had 30 rooms free of charge, 30 rooms at half price for refugees, and we were coordinating, helping people stay. They did a great job. And then my wife was also working with real estate agents to try and find accommodation. And so we finally found a place that was suitable for us. But everybody who's leaving doesn't want to move far. They want to stay as close to the border as possible, because everybody was wishing and does wish, oh, well, maybe we'll go back next week, right? Maybe it'll be over next week or next 2 weeks. So no one's like going far. They want to be close to their husbands, their workplaces, you know, their families, extended families, you know, grandparents. So no one wants to go far away from the border. You can go and get shelter, right? At the same time, you can't just pick and choose where you want to stay. Because we were one of the first time we could get that accommodation, and my wife was like a typical estate agent. Oh, let's look at 3 or 4 or 5. You know, a week later, people were taking apartments sight unseen. They were just, is it available? Boom, take it.
Yeah.
And I spoke to one of my friends who lives, I'm in Krakow just now, And he said, and he was about to move apartment. Just as the Ukraine had its problem with the refugees started coming, he said, I can't find an apartment now because I can't even look at it. He wants it long term for him, but he can't even see it because someone's taking it before he can get it. He even see it. So, and certainly that started to happen. Rent started to go up. Again, it puts the problem on the refugees because these people are wanting 1 month's rent up front. They want last month, they want a deposit, so you want 3 months rent up front before you even start, and it could be unfurnished. Of course, there's lots of people that are offering rooms and things like that. God bless, and they're doing everything they can. Lovely people, I met many. But it is temporary. You can't stay there till, if you've got a child and, if you've got two children and a mother, and they've said, listen, we've got a free room, please use the house, everything else. It sounds wonderful, and it is wonderful, and it's a blessing to have that. But really, after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, can you really live in a 1-bedroom with 2 kids?
Right, in somebody else's home, right?
Somebody else's home, and still feel as though, because they're proud people. We're all proud. They're going to say, "Oh, and I'll just keep on drinking your wine and eating your food." They want somehow to move on. It's very difficult. How do you do that? How do you move forward? So, but in our circumstance, I've got my businesses in Poland, so I just moved my office that I had in Kiev to closer to my business and put everybody around there and made sure that they had accommodation, etc. But my wife and I made a decision mentally to say, right, for the next 12 months we're here. Okay, then at least that would allow us to be able to move forward, because if you're treading water, going, maybe tomorrow we'll go back, maybe next week we'll go back, or let's just stay another 4 days and let's see, and you just always see. You can't do anything. Mentally, it's very difficult to do that. So he said, okay, we know we need to get the schools done. We're going to stay there. And listen, if everything goes brilliant and we can move back in 2 months, that's great. Then we'll do that. But mentally, we're going to say, no, 12 months we're going to commit, and we're going to put the skills in this school, and then we're going to be able to live here. And this is what, and at least then you can mentally build. But again, we're one of the more luckier ones. And that's what we said with our staff also. I think all of us needed that mental, decision so we could build or at least move forward, right? Rather than keeping,
right.
Not knowing.
To know that you have a home for 12 months is a really big deal.
But we are lucky enough that my business can give them the salary from the business in Poland. But if your business was in Ukraine and the business is now closed and you've got no salary and you've got to pay deposits and, you're gone, right? I mean, you need to find a job somewhere. And, it's there's some people are better than others. My brother's an IT guy as well as his wife, so they can work remotely. But of course, so many people can't, and so many people. I've known people that had businesses in Crimea and they lost that, and they lost apartments in Donetsk, moved to Kharkiv, and they got 8 years later got that blown up by the Russians. I mean, heartbreaking stuff,
Just goes on. So I feel
endless.
I know we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in. There's a sense here some of the viewers would like to understand, what is Putin's obsession with Ukraine? Do we know? And do you have any idea as to how this might end? I mean, obviously we all know that Putin just wants to conquer Ukraine. I personally feel that if he does that and he succeeds at that, that's the beginning of the rest of his game, which is probably an end on in Europe. What is your take on his obsession and how this might end?
Well, yeah, I would like to say it's not just started here. I mean, it started already many years ago when he took Crimea, or when he went to Georgia, even before that. So he's been testing the waters a lot here for many, many years. What's NATO going to do? How's Europe going to react if I cause this in Georgia? And then how about Moldova? And then how about Crimea if I did this? So he's been pushing. So this is a pattern already. Okay, this is not a starting point where we are. This is the progression of many, many years of doing what he wants, is to bring back the Soviet Union, right? And his sphere of influence, and have all these countries report into him, right? The Tsar mentality, right? And Ukraine is very important strategically for him, both geographically, but also, for food and for energy. It's a very strategic for him.
Mhm.
But he won't stop there. He'll go into Moldova, he'll go to Georgia, he'll go into Kazakhstan, he'll go into Belarus for sure, right?
Mhm.
So this is definitely no. So this is why it's so important. So what does he want? He wants much more than Ukraine. That's for sure. And he got away with Crimea, and he got away with Georgia, and he's got away with Moldova. And so he's just going to carry on until someone gives him a real bloody nose, right? And that's it. And that's how you stop him. And how's it going to end? Only if someone takes out Putin, he's removed from power, or the Russians go away, because Ukraine's been supplied so many weapons that it can actually defend itself. And there's enough people there that want to pick up guns, that want to do, but there's not enough ammunition there. That's what I'm saying. So there's millions and millions of people who want to fight, are happy to fight for the country, but they don't have the weapons yet.
So on that note, do you feel that Europe and NATO are doing enough to support Ukraine?
No, definitely not. I think, I'm only going to be a political guy, but I think what the president of Ukraine is saying is absolutely correct. And we've got to listen to this guy. This guy's on the ground. He knows how much weapons he's got. But we're also only being told also, there's also what NATO can say and what they might not say. They might say, oh, we're not doing this to provoke, but they might be supplying other weapons, right? And intelligence and other things. So let's maybe, I think the West know how important it is that Russia don't win this war, and that Ukraine is preserved, that they will do anything they can do, whether it will be silently or announcing that. But NATO's very scared of escalating this, but Putin also will not go and fight NATO, right? And I think this whole nuclear thing is not going to happen. It's not worth thinking about.
So on a lighter note, what are you planning to do this weekend?
There's a little concert just up the road. There's a Ukrainian violinist who's doing a concert. So we're going to support her, and just up the road, we're going for a barbecue at one of my friend's house on Sunday. We're all, from Ukraine. So whoever's in the region, we're getting together on Sundays. In Poland, everything's closed on Sunday. So, you go to church and you walk the parks and you have a coffee or a glass of wine on the square, which is beautiful, or barbecue. And I like that. When I first heard about it, I was like, I like things being open on Sunday. You get lots of things done. But actually, you plan it a lot better. Saturday, you do your shopping, you do everything you do, and Sundays are much more family, relaxed, friendly, and everybody's available, right? Because everybody's in the same boat. So we're doing that on Sunday, is getting together on that. I've got a lot of friends that pass by, of course, every week, because when they know where you are, they're transiting themselves, or they're going back into Ukraine to get stuff that they didn't bring the first time. So they've got maybe drivers or managers who are driving their cars to the border and filling it up with the clothes and other stuff, and then coming back into Poland, and then coming to seeing me. And there's all different people passing through all the time, so it never gets boring.
Have you been able to connect with any other Scots while you're over there as well?
Yeah, definitely. There's this head Scots guy, and is David McGeer. He's an ex-policeman, and he contacted me as soon as I arrived over, and he heard, and he's in charge of the whole Krakow expat website. He's been here many years. He got me to his house and brought my brother and his family. So there was, you got to watch when you invite me and my family. There's about 18 of us turn up. But yeah, we did some pizza and wine, and we had a very nice night. And it was, I've kept in contact with him. And there's other Scots that we've connected with that are actually living in Kharkiv. So yes, we sort of find each other quite quickly if we're in the same part of town, or it's also the same town. So yeah, he's been very helpful.
What would be a meaningful way for people in America to support, people on the ground? I know you're there and you seem quite established now, but what about people, who are really suffering? How can we help them in a meaningful way? What would be your recommendation?
Well, what we've done myself with the Lions Club is we've used my warehouse for all regional European Lions Club. We did say we don't want money, we wanted to send trucks, and we gave them a list of all the medical equipment and other stuff that we wanted. We don't want 10,000 jumpers of XXXX, we specifically want what these regions are looking for. And that's been wonderful. We use that as a hub to get things to Poland, and then the Ukrainian guys have then sending the trucks within 24 hours. It's then in Ukraine getting distributed. Now, of course, in the States and other places, I get it. It's not so easy. Listen, money's the best thing. It really is. But I understand that we all got trust issues with sending money. But there is good organizations if you look properly. Some people don't like the bigger organizations because money gets trapped there for maybe too long. There is other organizations where the money gets spent much quicker, right? And everybody, I've done that for several friends. I'm not offering it here today, but they said, "Oh, I want to support the pets," and I had a little cake shop, and I've raised €2,000, and I said, right, I went out to the shop with my boys. We went to the pet shop, bought €2,000 with the guys who were doing the distribution. So they bought exactly what people were asking for, and then we gave it to 2 organizations, and they then distributed between train stations and the city. But I wouldn't mention one, but there are good ones, and if you find a family, find someone that you can sponsor, that goes a long way, because there's only so much clothes people can wear. They need to feed their children. They need to get money to travel. They need they can't just live on handouts all the time. Although people will be working, they want to work, but as I said, there's only so much. But inside Ukraine, there's still 8, 9, 10 million being in the cities who have no food, and so there's so much need for food products even to be in there. So it's not just about the refugees. Refugees who come out are getting looked after, give or take. It's the ones who are in the countries also that are really suffering, right? And so there's just such a need for so much. And it's also about what you can do, where your contacts are. Maybe if you're part of a Rotary or club, or you're part of a Lions club, get in contact with the Warsaw Polish Lions and say, we've raised some money, and give it to these guys.
Right.
The closer you are to the conflict, the better you'll spend the money, right, on where the needs are, right? And so do something like that, or go to the Rotaries. These guys are trustworthy, and they'll get it very quickly, and they'll spend it in the right way.
That's great. Well, Stuart, it has been really wonderful to chat with you this evening. Let's stay in contact. We wish you all the very best for a safe, happy future.